Welcome back to the Midway Business Podcast, where we dive into conversations with real business leaders about what's truly driving success. I'm Jimmy DeMambro, co-host, filling in for Butch Zemar while he's out. And today's guest is Eric Dingler. He is the author of Hire to Grow, Make Your Next Hire Pay for Themselves in 30 Days. He's got nearly 30 years of experience. Eric helps founders build teams that think independently, solve problems, make decisions without depending on the owner for everything. He has put these principles into practice by leading 2 businesses remotely while traveling the world with his wife and 4 children. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Jimmy, thanks for having me here. I'm excited. I got all the rest of the day cleared, so let's do it. Ask me as many questions as you want.
I love it. Let's start off with the most simplest one. Tell the listeners what you do and what you do so great on a daily basis, and how they can understand more about what you provide.
I am a all-out leadership freak, if you will allow it. Leadership is the capacity our businesses will never outgrow. And what I love about leadership is you learn a leadership principle for work, and you can apply that in your marriage. You can apply that in your parenting. You learn a leadership principle in your family. You can apply it at work. Leadership just happens everywhere. And when you learn to lead better, you live better. And so that's what I do. I own a digital marketing agency that I have to interact with the team there about 5 hours a week. But besides that, they run that business at this point. It's a little over 6 years old now. And with that, my family and I, like you said, we've lived in 55 Airbnbs in 20 countries in 3.5 years.
Wow.
And living out of carry-on luggage only. And our kids are currently 13, 15, 18, and 19.
I'm in the same wheelhouse as you with 3 of my own. And I would assume, just based on what you're sharing in regards to your personal side of your life, that they're learning a lot of great lessons from dad, right? In regards to leadership and how it can play into life.
We hope so. We have 7 family core values. And they happen to align with the spelling of our last name. And the L in Dingler stands for leadership happens everywhere. I play my part. And so we're regularly have been talking to our kids about leadership and giving them opportunities to lead and follow well, and hopefully modeling what leadership for them.
I love it. Tell me a little bit more about your background. How did you get to this place in your career?
Yeah, so starting out, I got hired way ridiculously too young to be the director of a little church camp. And so I was not qualified, never should have been hired, but I was. My first 3 summers, I was a prick. I was not a good leader. I led from the position of my job title and that only. But luckily, I had a desire to want to get better. And so I thought, well, I'm going to be even a better leader. And so after about my 3rd summer, I started studying leadership because I had the fall and the winter to go, okay, what worked, what didn't? And over the next 12 years, I did that over and over and over, and learned that leadership isn't because of, job title, and just leaned into it. Had all of these 15 different laboratories of building a team. So at the end of that, we left the camp. We were recruited into a large mega church to be a campus pastor at one of the campuses. 2 years into that, and really became apparent I'm not a second chair leader. So we left that and went and planted a church and built a team for that. Installed a new pastor there once I got it to the point where I was kind of bored with it because it was just running and doing its thing. And as a serial starter, I was ready to go start the next thing. And so that was a nonprofit. And the story there is while we were pastoring, we wanted to adopt. We had 2 children. We felt like the next thing we were being called to do was adopt. So we adopted 2 children. But at the end of that, we knew going into it, we wanted to do it debt free. But how do you make an extra $50,000 as a pastor? There's really no way to do. Embezzling really wasn't the option. So I knew how to build websites. So I started building websites as a side hustle. Brought our kids home and looked up, and I was the accidental CEO of a business. So we started a nonprofit, and we used the business to fund our nonprofit to help other families with their adoptions. And so that's where I then brought our kids home, and one thing led to another, and we decided to go on a 3-month trip, and we never stopped. We just kept traveling.
Well, it's a very fascinating story, and I could definitely see how it brought you to where you are today. And, one of the things I do hear continuously when I speak to leaders is, as well as people who study leadership, is that people aren't necessarily leaders, and they're put in these roles to be a leader without the setup for success, we'll say. And what can you say to people out there that might have been, even currently with the challenges we're facing, being forced into a leadership role that they might not have wanted, or it was just because they have nowhere else to go in the company and they're pushed into that spot?
Yeah, we see that a lot. Somebody's great at sales, and so they're promoted and pushed into a regional sales manager. Or they're good at their job, and so a lot of people naturally think, well, they're going to be good at leading other people to do that job. And so if you're in that job and that's you, and you don't want to leave it, the first thing I would say is give yourself permission to leave, and look for something and step out of that. But if it's not an option for you, maybe the financial difference is I really need to keep this level,
Mm-hmm.
Well, luckily leadership is a skill and it can be learned. And so again, I would go back to give yourself permission to accept the fact that you don't know what you don't know. And leaders are learners. The old saying used to be for years and years, for a long time, that leaders are readers. Well, with the advancement in technology, why were they reading? What's the principle behind that practice? Well, the principle behind that practice was to learn. So leaders are learners. I don't read that much anymore, but I'm constantly listening to a book, listening to a leadership podcast, going to conferences, getting in a room with other leaders. Since I've started, Jimmy, especially now in my business, I always have 2 coaches. I have a leadership coach, and I also have a business coach. Now, my business coach changes season to season as my business does, as we grow into new levels, and I need to learn new skills at that level of business. But I generally keep a leadership coach for a pretty long season. So give yourself permission not to know, and then start learning. There's no shortage of podcasts and books and resources.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. It's humble yourself and realize what you're struggling with or doing well with. And it's almost have someone else see it from fresh eyes and really give you that support. And if you don't have that support unit, like, you need to find it, right?
Yeah. Well, that was really good, Jimmy. If I can, I'm going to interrupt real quick. That was really good what you said. The humble yourself. A lot of people think that humility is denying our strengths. When somebody says, well, you really did good at that, we think humility is, oh, well, I was just lucky. Oh, I just got a big break. We think it's that. Humility isn't denying our strengths. Humility is admitting our weaknesses. And when somebody compliments you, just say, thank you. I worked really hard to learn how to do that. Or thank you. I appreciate hearing that. So just say thank you and receive it, because really humility is what you just said, admitting our weaknesses, not denying our strengths.
Yeah, I love that. It's I feel it plays into my next question very well. And what I keep seeing out there in the marketplace is there's a lot of people that are just losing trust, because things are so challenging right now. People are losing jobs. Prices keep going up. We don't know the answers, and we're looking to somebody, something, and it's hard for us to look within. But what can you tell the leaders out there in regards to these challenges, especially now? Like, how can they gain trust, and how do they face those really tough decisions?
Yeah, well, um, trust is grown in light. Secrecy, lack of information to people, your team, yourself, like that creates distrust. So there are a lot of things that I then would recommend doing based on what you said in that. For some people, it's stop reading so much news. Because in reality, it's probably and not as bad as it seems to be everywhere in every situation. So you got to kind of keep perspective. And so one thing is stop reading so much news. Now, for some of us, we need to know what's going on in the world because our businesses are impacted by the market, and things like that. But I tell people very bluntly, if your business has been stuck for 6 months, it's not the market. It's not it changes because of AI. It's not the economy. If your business has been stuck for 6 months, it's a leadership issue because leadership isn't about getting it right. Leadership is about making adjustments. I'm constantly adjusting my business and making pivots here and there and tweaks, and we got to tack. A sailboat can sail into a headwind, but they do it by tacking. They go this way, they go this way, they go this way. But the sailboat makes forward progress even in the strongest of headwinds because the leader of that boat, the captain of that boat, has learned to pivot and adjust and capture the wind in the right way. It's the same exact thing running our businesses. We have to pivot here, pivot there, and we have to adjust. And for some people, it can be kind of a game. So it's that. The other thing is, if you have a team, realize your team is feeling this as well. So celebrate wins with them. What we celebrate, we chase. So celebrate the things with your team that are good. One of the ways, so the D in our family core values is dwell on the positives, address the negatives. There are negatives. There are. So we have to address them because you can't put your head in the sand and hope it all goes away. But what happens is we tend to start to obsess on them, Jimmy, and it consumes our conversations. It consumes our time. We take it home with us and we worry about it. And nobody's ever fixed anything by worrying about it. So just address it, give them clarity, get a coach, this is, I think, one of the greatest values of a healthy mastermind, is to be in the right some masterminds start to become echo chambers of groupthink and woe is me. Others go too far where they just everything sunshine and rainbows and unicorns and cookies. You want to find that group where it's like, here's here's the ideal of where we're moving. Here's the reality. Our job is to manage the tension between those two and attack our businesses into the headwind to keep moving towards that reality. So I don't know if that made sense or helps, but that's
I think that's great. That's great thought. Especially during these times, it just reinforces that other people, other things out there, are super important to, make part of your leadership day to day, because you can't be the only person and pound your chest. And I would think in your, customers that you work with and clients that you do face a lot of leaders that have strong egos and don't think that they need any help in regards to some of these thoughts that you are sharing. With that said, how can they let go? I think that's a really challenging things that a lot of leaders face, especially when you shared earlier that you're traveling the world with your family and you have learned to let go. But how do you, I guess, one, discover it, and two, help them get past it so they can understand that leadership is more about setting the team and the systems?
Yeah. Well, I do run into, a lot of type A's, and that are leaders. And, I'm very blunt. I'm not everybody's cup of tea for coaching. I'm very blunt. I have no problem asking somebody, I probably ask a couple times a week, oh, how's that working for you? Like excuses are like buttholes. Everybody has one and they all stink. All I'm hearing from you is excuses right now.
Yeah.
And another thing I tell people all the time is business is hard. It's harder when you're stupid, and you're just flat right now being stupid. And so you got to have somebody that's not afraid to call you out because they want what's best for you. It's not pride and ego on my part. I'm on a crusade to help create jobs. And so I want to help you do that. I want to help your business be more successful so you can create jobs. I'd love to create 10,000 jobs in the next 5 years. I'm not going to do that in my business. I don't want a company that big. You start to lose connection and things, and it's just not, I'm not called to that. But if I can help 5,000 small business owners create 2 jobs, I love the power of multiplication. That small team taking a hill together. We're in battle here. Let's fight this with someone. So I'm not afraid to just call someone out on their BS, is one. And then the other part of it is, how do you start to let go? You have to, your identity can't be a business owner. Like that's what I have found is this, the people that tend to have the most struggle letting go is they generally seem to be the technicians in their business. They make the widget, or they created the widget, or they are somehow the product, or, if they build websites or do copywriting or do graphic design, or, have a software as a service, whatever it is, they started getting a lot of compliments early on. Hey, this is good. This is great. And now their identity is wrapped up into that, and they're afraid that if they let it go, because I hear, well, what if people don't do it as good as me? What happens is this. Well, wait a second. Honestly, you're telling me you're the best person in the world at this? If that was true, you wouldn't need me to help you with coaching, because your business would be the biggest in the world. So you're not the best yet. You're not there's a reason you're not the biggest. You can only do so much. So let's cut the ego here. Let's start getting some people and developing them to make decisions the way you would, which is key, something we can talk about in a little bit. Because that's where what happens is people hire someone and they try to train them what to do in every scenario, and you can't do that. You have to teach people how to make judgment calls. There's 2 things we can delegate. We can delegate knowledge. We can delegate judgment. Most people try to delegate knowledge. And there's a limit to that, because knowledge doesn't make decisions. That you may leverage that in judgment, but if all you're doing is giving people knowledge, there's a resistance there that they're going to have to make judgment calls. You need to teach people how to make judgment. That's why for me and my family, we can go spend 10 days, and we've been in the Amazon jungle for 10 days. Nobody could have reached us if they wanted to. We're talking about doing a backpacking trip next April for my birthday. And we're thinking about taking, my wife and I were talking last night about, I'll probably just take the month off. Most small business owners can't take 10-day vacation.
Yeah.
I love to help them create the systems in the team so they can take a 30-day. And the core of that is trust. And how you start to get there is back out your identity from the business. I can walk away from my business tomorrow. because it doesn't define who I am as a person. I am Marissa's husband. I am the father of my 4 children. I am the son of my parents. Like, I am the friend of these. Like, that's who I am. I happen to own a business, and I need to be able to walk away from that, as my identity. Once I get to that point, now it's easier to start trusting people, but you have to develop your team. You don't train your team, you develop your team.
Yeah, you said something that really struck me, and it's really about finding your identity, and I would assume would be step one with any leader is, who are you? And, try to understand from their perspective is, I know, at least for me growing up, it was really, embedded in me at an early age. You go to school, you graduate, and you get a good job. But that's not the way the world really works, because things can happen. Like, not to reflect back on COVID, a lot of people lost their jobs. Well, a lot of people are losing their jobs now, and they're feeling like they lost their identity. And that is a really tough thing to find. And it's almost, focusing on that and really discovering, feeling confident about that would go to step 2, which would be, okay, you're a business owner. But, something that you did bring up in regards to development, just the word alone is really, it's a really sore topic with me, just because I'm a youth coach, and I don't feel there's enough coaches, which technically are the leaders, really focusing on development. They're focusing on the trophies. They're focusing on creating these all-star teams, and they're focusing on pounding their chest that they did it. But did they do it in such a way that the kids even care, right? Or did they get excited about, wow, I learned how to catch whatever it is, a ground ball or flying pass? How do you face development when it comes to that? Because I don't know. I mean, as a leader, if there's a lot of leaders that understand the importance of development, would you say that it's best to hire someone to do the development because they're just not good at it? And get to that place of what you're talking about is train on making judgment calls.
Yeah, I think it's got to come from the leader, because your voice, your words carry 1,000 or weigh 1,000 pounds in the business. An outsider is an outsider who's not going to be here in 3 months. Now, you can get coaching on how to do that, and that's actually how we've designed our coaching to work. I'll do development sessions once a month, but it's train the trainer. I train the CEOs on a development topic, and then we give them the handout and the resource. They can just turn around and parrot it and just go say what we said, because it's not about the technician role that your team is doing. It's developing them to think and make decisions based upon your values. And so with that, I think there's a couple things with what you just said. And I'll get back to the developing here in just a second. But the first is that idea of, like, what are we chasing? Are we chasing the trophy? Or are we chasing, the progress, the growth? Again, it goes back, what we celebrate, we chase. What gets rewarded gets repeated. So, like, in my digital marketing agency, what we celebrate big, and I mean, we've got all kinds of weird things we do to celebrate this. We celebrate a 13th month invoice, because that means a client bought in decided to trust us to start out. We begin to deliver our services for them, and we have continued to deliver for a year, a return on investment, that when it comes to the time to make the decision, are they going to continue working with us or are they going to jump ship? They decide to work with us. That we celebrate that 13th month invoice. And now my team is constantly at month 3, month 4, month 5. How are we going to get them? How are we going to get this client to the 13th month? How are we going to get them to the 13th month? Because a lot of businesses, they celebrate the new client. We got a new client. Oh my gosh, we're so excited. Da, da, da. Whatever. It's easier to get one person to buy from you 100 times than 100 people to buy from you one time. So just business 101 is I love monthly recurring revenue in our agency. And so we celebrate that. So you got to step back a little bit and think in your business, what are we really going to celebrate? But then when it comes to development, it seems a little, when I was first growing as a leader, I'd go to a conference, I'd hear somebody talk about, you got to have your vision, your mission, and your core values, and so I would go through the exercises and but then just like a lot of places, they would just live on that document. Maybe we'd have a poster hanging in the wall, but we never went back to it. But when I finally realized the power and the purpose of the vision, mission, core values, it changed everything at the camp. And it's been vital in every organization I've led as the owner. I'm on the board of several organizations. And this is the thing I focus on there. Your vision tells your team, we're going to the top of that mountain or we're going to the abyss of this ocean. It paints the picture of where you're headed. And that never changes. You're going to marry that. This is our ride or die, goal. This is where we're headed. This is the picture of the preferred future, and we're going to create it. Now, how you create it is the mission. That's the vehicle you're taking. Are we taking a hot air balloon to the top of the mountain? Or are we taking a 4x4? Now, this could change. You may start in a 4x4, and then you may switch to a hot air balloon. At some point, you may switch to a different vehicle. I don't know. So your vehicle can kind of change. Once you've established your vehicle, then you want to develop your core values. And your core values say, this is what inside this vehicle guides us. This is how we make decisions. This is how we behave inside here. So for like my team in my agency, we have our 5 primary core values come from the word focus, because we say our focus is for our clients' ultimate success, FOCUS, and our core values are first-class experiences. And then it goes, understand, obsessing about the client's goals, communicating on a cadence, understanding their point of view, and systematize for success. So when I'm not about 2 months ago now, Jimmy, my family and I, we were heading out of town to go camping, meet up with some friends. And as we got pretty close to this rural campground, I get a text message from a long time client. Very few clients now have my cell phone number. So this is a client we've had for a long time. And their website was, the orders were messing up in the website. And they were expecting 20,000 orders over the next 3 days. They had just, in a strategic partnership with another place, all this marketing had started. And this guy is like very upset. And so I text our director of web services, Peter. Peter says, I'm on it. I text the business owner. While my wife does, she's handling it for me as I'm driving. And she says, Eric wanted to let you know, he's told Peter's on it. We're losing cell service. He can get a text messages out right now, but not phone calls. And the business owner was like, I expect Eric to call me within the next hour. So 3 days later, I called the client because my kids are in the back seat. They've been looking forward to this camping trip. My wife loves these things. I enjoy it. We were meeting up with friends. I'm not calling you tonight, and I didn't say anything. We just went into the woods. So I called the client when we got out. And as said, hey, just wanted to call and check in. Now, I had already got an update from Peter on my team. He's like, oh my gosh, Eric, thank you. Peter was amazing. I couldn't be happier. Well, here, what Peter had to end up doing all weekend long, 24/3 for the 3 days. Not to get into too much of the technical, but for people that don't know websites, but there was a piece of software that was breaking on the website and we couldn't fix it. We had to wait for the developer of that, and we couldn't get to them until Monday. Every 2 hours, Peter had to go into the website all day and night and select all the new orders and manually change the status from pending to confirmed. Now, when I talked to Peter about it the next day during his weekly one-on-one, I said, Peter, I have a question. Why did you decide to handle it that way? And he said, well, he goes, at first I thought about, sending a video and showing the client how to do it. But then I thought, that's not a first-class experience. In first class, problems don't become the customer's problem. He goes, it wasn't his fault that software wasn't working. Wasn't our fault either, but I can't put it back on him and for this to be first class. He's like, so I just, set an alarm and every 2 hours got up and took care of it, and just took care of it for him. And I said, thanks. That's exactly right. I knew, because as we're getting to the campsite, my wife's like, well, do you need to go back out, and work on this and follow up? And I said, no, the team's got it. We're going to be fine. I had never once even kind of had a training session with Peter that said, if this software breaks and this is how you solve it. I talk to my team every week about our core value. I'm constantly talking about our vision, our mission. But every week I train the team. I develop the team around one of our core values and then around topics like growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and all the business books, business owner, the gap in the gain, 10X is easier than 2X, all of these, books that are targeted to business owners. When I read one of those, there's 9 times out of 10, there's a nugget that I go, oh my gosh, I want my team to know this. And so I develop a training for them, and we walk through that once a month during an all staff. We have an all staff once a month where we don't talk about, the most, what's the newest adjustment to make on a Google ad landing page to increase conversion 3%. Do my team, do they need to know that? Yeah. Do we need to talk about it in an all staff? No, not at all.
Yeah.
Because anyway, so that's the power of teaching your core values to your team, of sitting down and going, what guides me when I make a decision? Well, I want my clients to have a first class experience. I want to be focused. I'm always focused on their goal. I don't use technical lingo when I talk to my clients because I understand. I try to think about it from their point of view. I love creating a system for success. To me, it's a failure if a client sends us an email and says, hey, I'm just checking in on our project. To me, that's a failure. A client should never wonder how something's going. So that's communicating on a cadence. So as I worked those out, I decided these are the core values of my company, because it's what's important to me and how I've made decisions that got my company to where it was. I encapsulated those, but then I developed my team to use those. And so that's why I trust my team. I hope none of them hear this, but they're no more special than a lot of other people I could have hired for the role.
Well, I think the word culture is really what you're referencing in regards to those core values, because it goes beyond core values. And I think, just from my 2 cents of being a marketing guy, I think the word branding has became too saturated, and a lot of people really don't understand what it is. It's not just the logo. It is the culture. And that culture is defined with the mission coming from the vision down to the core values. And you're talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're talking about that is a great first step for companies, especially if they're startups, to build a system where your employees understand the culture. And are they a good fit for the culture? Because they may not like that culture. But will they drink the Kool-Aid, right?
Exactly. I get asked a lot of times, I need to hire the right person for this role. How do I find the right person? And I'm always like, well, the first question you have to answer is, are you the type of leader the person you want to hire wants to follow? And is your company the type of company the person you want to hire wants to work at? Because they're not going to say what a really solid anytime we hire somebody, the very first conversation is, hey, thanks for, being interested in our company. I want to share 3 things with you: our vision, our mission, our core values. And we jump right to that, because a healthy, your vision, mission, and core values repels the wrong people and attracts the right ones. And so we use them from the very beginning of recruitment all the way through onboarding, delegating, and developing. And it's that framework, we call it ROD2, that when I started looking at, what did I learn at camp about building, 15 teams, I had to recruit the right people by being the right place. I had to onboard them the right way, so I didn't have to worry about correcting, people later when that hadn't, understood the culture. So I had to onboard them right way. I had to delegate the right things to them, and I had to develop them to think the right way. And so that's what I do in my company. It's what I did in the church. It's what I do on, for organizations I'm the board of, and it's what I coach people to do in their business.
This is such great advice for leaders out there, because we do talk about systems on this show a lot. And this is actually pulling out just one type of system that a leader can develop, because there's multiple systems you can have in an operation. But when it comes to your people and running the company, I think this is probably, if it's not one of the most important, because it's the starting point, right? And it's the dugout of the baseball team. It's, the bench where everybody sits. It's the locker room. This is, I feel probably one of the best systems you can build. The culture doesn't just happen organically. Sometimes it does add to it, but at the same time, you need to define right up front as the leader, what is your culture going to be? Vision, mission, core values. And, from then on, the right people is where you start to look for. And what could you say, and what do you tell owners who say they cannot afford to hire? Especially now, right? With the economy.
Yeah. Well, I would say, my first hire in my agency, for the company I own, was 2 hours a week at $4.50 an hour. So I'm going to say, you're telling me you don't have $9? Really? If you don't have $9 per week to pay somebody to help you, your business has got significantly larger problems. Yeah. And so, I tell people what I teach and unpack in my book, is to start with hiring for 10 hours. And you can hire a virtual assistant for $60 to $120 per week. You've got $60. You find it. So you're going to hire them. You're going to take 10 hours off of your plate and give to them. But before you do that, Jimmy, what you're going to do is you're going to 10-10-80 those 10 hours. And here's what I mean by 10-10-80 it. You're going to take 10% of the time, and that's you time. Welcome to the benefit of being a business owner. You take time off of your plate and you don't put it back. You hire something, you're going to give away 10 hours. One of those hours is you time. Take your spouse out, go for a walk, binge something, watch something on Netflix. I don't care. Take up painting. Like, that's now your hour. Then the next 10%, and I do 10% because some people I work with, they start up by hiring 20 hours, and so then I would 10-10-80 it, 2 hours. And then for the second one, 2 hours. But 10% of the time is now leadership time. You're going to take that hour or 2 hours a week, and you're going to learn as a leader, and you're going to schedule once a month a one-on-one leadership coaching session with that person you just hired, because you now have somebody to lead. So we're going to 10-10-80. The 80% though, and this is key, we're going to identify 8 hours of revenue generating work, not revenue opportunity work. We're going to go, well, okay, how'd you get your last 20 clients? We're going to do more of what works, less of what doesn't. This isn't where I've had people like, well, I hired somebody and I launched, decided to start a YouTube channel. Wow, that was really stupid. You know how long it takes to really grow and build up a YouTube channel to where you're actually getting, business from it? Like, that doesn't make sense. So it's a business decision. And I'm kind of blunt with people on it, but we're going to come up with those 8 hours that's revenue generating activity. And you're going to do that, because imagine what would happen if you had 8 hours a week that you could suddenly put towards the activities that actually bring in increased revenue. This is exactly how you get your next hire to pay for themselves multiples and multiples over what they cost you in 30 days. Suddenly now you've got the profit and the increase from the increased revenue to really start to hire some, higher level people that take some things on. But it starts by getting off 10, 20 hours of off of your plate that doesn't need to be there. And so that's how somebody can get started. You can afford, if you, honest to goodness, Jimmy, if you didn't have $60 extra last week, you couldn't even reduce your own pay 60. If you don't have margin of $60, you're something's way wrong. Like, there are apps you can cancel. There's something you can cancel. You're not charging enough. You need to increase your rates today. The next quote you give is going to have $60 more on it. Like, it's not hard to get $60. So that's what I tell people. You can afford it. You're afraid to. You don't have and it seems overwhelming. Like, oh my gosh, well, now I got to have everything ready. No, you don't. When my team get hired, we just tell them, hey, listen, just so you know, our airplane is taken off, but we didn't finish building it, but we can't land. So it's a little chaotic. If you join our airplane, it's a little chaotic behind the scenes, just so you know. If you don't mind being a part of something, and, I just hired a new executive assistant 6 months ago. And this was with my first executive assistant. And I said, Emily, I have nothing in place for you. Your first couple months is just going to be creating systems and checklists. And I don't know how to have you manage my email. You're going to figure that out. And I was like, if you want to work for somebody that has all this figured out and can hand you a playbook and you just run with it, you don't want to take this job. And she goes, I love the idea of building this and being a part of it. Come on board. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think that, the point making of autonomy is, at least what I've learned and studied, is one of the top 3 why people like their jobs is the autonomy, right? Train me and let me do my job. And in this case, I think your executive assistant is, excited about autonomy, which there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's people who want structure, tell me where the square peg is so I can put it in a square hole, but it's not necessarily everybody, right?
Yeah.
For the listeners out there, what can you say that gets in the way, the biggest mistake to avoid for leaders?
Generally it's broken mindsets about something, because you're either believing that nobody can do it as well as you, or it's just faster to do it yourself. When you have more money, when you have more time, like you're giving yourself these excuses. And I would just say, how have those been working for you? Like, have you been telling yourself the same story for 6 months and your business still isn't growing? Well, I think you need to change the story. It's not working for you, and that's okay. Nobody's born knowing how to do all of this. And so humble yourself and get some help. ask some, and here's the thing. I love this. I'm constantly learning leadership, teaching leadership, but it's like the cobbler's kids have no shoes. I need somebody that's speaking into me because I have blinders in my business, right? And so I have to have, that's why I still have a leadership coach. And besides, I think everybody in life should have a Batman and a Robin. You should have somebody that's your Batman that's speaking into your life, but you should be speaking in the life of somebody else. So everybody should have a Batman and Robin. And so for leaders, that Robin may be your team, and that's fine. But get a coach, get some help, be learning, for sure.
I love that. Eric, you've provided us so many great suggestions and tips. You know, I know the people listening out there, they're going to appreciate it. I know I do. And I really appreciate the time you shared with us today. Once again, Eric's book is called Hire to Grow, Make Your Next Hire Pay for Themselves in 30 Days. If any listeners would like to reach out to you directly, what is the best way for them?
It really sounds prideful, but it's just ericdingler.com. Just my name. Go to ericdingler.com. You can find the book. Again, the book is really for those people that have never hired or hiring has been a struggle. And so the book, there's a chapter in there about the 6 myths that keep us from hiring. And so you can start there if you want to, or then it just completely unpacks ROD2. In fact, Jimmy, one of the sections in the book is on the onboarding. When we hire a new team member, nobody in my team stops working to train the new people. All of our hires onboard them. They train themselves. And so I walk exactly through how do our new hires, when Emily started, her first 2 days on the job, I was on a train one day traveling with my family, and we were in the airport in Portugal getting ready for a plane, and on a plane back to the United States, her second day on the job. She showed up. Her third day, I showed up. She had access to everything. She knew what was going on. She was like trained and ready to hit the ground running on day 3. So I walked through that. If anybody's listening there, they have the team, but they're like, I can't get away from my team. Like, I've built a business that's working, but now won't let me take a break. Every problem still landing on my desk. I'm putting out fires all the time. I got the team. Well, I've got coaching for that. And so I can help you, bring some order to that chaos, develop some systems, and begin to develop your team so you can take a 3-day vacation and then a 5-day and then a 10-day and eventually 30 days if you want to. It's definitely 100% achievable.
Yeah, it sounds refreshing, I'll tell you that. And summer's not over. So other than school lurking, I think, the listeners out there jump on that. It's important to get some time off. Thanks again, Eric, for your time. Appreciate it. We'll see you next episode of Midway Business Podcast. And remember, leaders, keep moving forward.